How's Frank? Hey everybody, and welcome to the 4th episode of First Time DM Diaries. In this session I'm going to be going over my 4th session of all time. So, interesting thing about this session, first things first, unfortunately Treachery was unable to play with us this particular week. The reason being he had hurt his lower back playing Pokemon Go while walking up the stairs. If you're waiting for me to tell you that was a joke, it isn't. That is literally exactly what happened. And the second order of business is we actually introduced a brand new player. So one of my coworkers was interested in playing with us, so we had him show up early and roll up a brand new character. He decided he wanted to be a sorcerer, which is perfectly cool. But the only problem is, I have absolutely no clue how magic works in this game. So the funny thing was, it was a learning experience for both him and me, because he would ask me, hey, what spells can I use? How does this work? What's my spell save DC? What is spell save DC? And just the whole time I'm right there with him looking in the player's manual going, you know what, that's a good question, let's find out. This particular character is a tiefling sorcerer, his skin is entirely black, and he gained his powers by getting struck by lightning right in the dick. This character's name? Jeff Dunham. So the way we decided we were going to introduce this new player is, he actually is from the village of Lakeview where they're hanging out, and he was staying in the inn which they burned down. So now he's just going to hang out with them and see what they're up to. As far as writing off Treachery for this session, the way we went about it was, he just got way too drunk on the mushroom wine, so he was unconscious the whole time. In fact, from here on out, every time a player missed a session, we just say they were wasted on the mushroom wine, and they wake up in the next session not knowing what the hell just happened. So I decided in this session the players had all made it to level 4, and I should actually explain how I'm doing this. So I'm not actually using experience points for leveling up. I just kind of decided off the bat that was more work than I felt like doing for my first time, and maybe once they start getting to higher levels I'll start incorporating it, but the way I'm doing it now, they started at level 3, it takes 3 sessions for them to level up. Level 4, it'll take 4 sessions, 5, it'll take 5 sessions, and hopefully that will make sense in the end. I really hope it will. So without further ado, let's dive right into this session. So this session began with the players all waking up in the barn from the old man which they extorted in the previous session. Except Hork is now being cradled by a tiefling. And something I don't think I mentioned is when the players killed Spike, Hork actually took his head and has it hanging around his waist. So now he's just got the head of a tiefling hanging around with another tiefling. So Hork sees this tiefling and thinks to himself, oh, you must be one of Spike's brothers. Are you Spook? To which Jeff responds, why, 'cause I'm black? This is instance one of many, but after this session I told all the players you're going to sensitivity training afterwards. So the players all leave the barn, and outside on a fence about 10 feet away, they see an owl just kind of hanging out there. The owl has a letter in its mouth. Jeff then asks me, hey, am I allowed to use spells outside of combat? You absolutely are. He says, I'm going to cast Acid Bubble on that owl. To which Hork says, wait, time out, hold on. And he grabs the letter. Then he says, okay, now kill it. I described to Jeff, okay, so you fire a bubble of acid at this owl, and as it hits the owl just kind of starts melting. First the feathers, then the skin, then the muscle, then the bones, and then the 5-foot area around it, everything just kind of dissolves. So then they read the letter. The letter says, I am on my way to the capital today to plead our case for war. Please return this letter with any evidence you have found so far. V. Now all the players are like, oh, whoops. Well, it didn't make much of a difference because they didn't have any evidence anyway, but they just killed the messenger owl. Oh well. So they go into the village and meet up with the local blacksmith because Jeff wants armor. Now at this point I wasn't 100% sure how armor worked with sorcerers, but basically the ruling is, if you are not proficient in any type of armor, which sorcerers are not by default, if you wear armor, you cannot cast spells. And I pretty much told him as such, even though I wasn't 100% sure on the ruling, I was pretty sure that sorcerers couldn't wear armor unless they multi-classed. But even still, they went to a local blacksmith. It was a dwarven man, I don't even think I gave him a name, and he doesn't want anything to do with them, because from his perspective, these guys showed up, started trouble, and burned down the inn. Which technically they did not do, which was something Littlefoot immediately pointed out as soon as the dwarf accused him. He said, why, because I'm a dragonborn? To which the answer was, actually yes, that is why. I'm telling you, sensitivity training. So they didn't get really far, although they did show the dwarf their short sword, which they completely forgot about, the one they took off of Spike's body. They showed it to him, and there's golden engravings on the hilt. The dwarf kind of looks at it, and he looks back to them, he's like, "This is celestial. Where the hell did you get this?" To which they weren't going to tell him where they got it because they're in enough trouble already. He wasn't sure what it said, but he definitely could tell it was valuable. It was real gold engraving in there. He told them he'd give them 200 gold for that short sword. No deal. The players were all pretty sure that thing was special. And it is. At this point, Jeff asked if there was any way he could tell if it was magical because he has powers. I told him he can roll Arcana, to which he said, "Wait, you can just do that?" I'm like, "Dude, this is D&D. You can do pretty much whatever you want. Just ask the other players." He rolled high enough, and I told him, "Yeah, you don't know exactly what it does, but you can definitely tell there is magic in that sword." So they decided to hold on to it. Actually, at that point, they just gave it to Jeff because they've all got their own weapons at that point, and nobody uses short swords anyway. So at this point, they know where the soldiers are because Hork had talked to the mercenary captain before all hell broke loose, and he knows that the soldiers are in a cave a bit further to the east of the village. So at this point, they all group up and say, "Well, let's take our wagon and take it over to the cave." Problem: there is a forest between them and the cave. They had asked if they could get the wagon through. I said, nah, they really wouldn't be able to. It's not quite wide enough. So what they did is they're like, okay, we're going to take this wagon. We're going to park it at that barn we were staying at. So Littlefoot takes it upon himself to do this, and he goes to the old man and says, "Hey, watch this wagon for us. We'll be back to grab it." The old man just says, "Please don't hurt my family." Littlefoot's response, verbatim, "We might. Goodbye." Lawful evil, ladies and gentlemen. So they start making their way through the forest, and I told them they begin smelling something horrible. I actually told Littlefoot, "You are familiar with this smell as a sailor. It smells like somebody left fish on the deck after gutting it and did not clean it up for days, and it's just been baking in the sun. It smells horrible." And on top of that, they feel the ground shaking again. How many frickin' times have I told them the ground shakes? Actually, even in my current session, I still tell them the ground shakes when something's going on. Trademark for me, I guess. But I told them it wasn't like the earthquake or the land shark. It was like something was stomping off in the distance. They actually sent Dewey forward to scout out the area. Well, as soon as he got to the clearing and saw what it was, he had come back and described the creatures before them. They were two giants, but these giants looked a bit different. They had green, scaly skin, very long claws, wild, long hair, and tusks. Now, the players at this point had all guessed that they were trolls, but they had Dewey roll nature to see if he knew, and he definitely knew they're trolls. Well, now Littlefoot at this point asks, "Wait, can I burn down this forest?" I'm like, I mean, yeah, you could. You could do that. You certainly could burn down this forest. But why? If I were to guess, his reasoning would be it would make the trolls go away or at the very least kill them. But then he asks me, "Wait, are there innocents in this forest?" To which I just gave him the straight up unknown, which is code for I know, you don't. So at that point he's like, okay, that's not going to work. And we can't drive the wagon through, correct? Correct, you cannot get the wagon through the forest. He then asks, can we get a horse through? And I said, yeah, I could see that. That'd be reasonable enough. So the plan was, Ducky had written a response letter to Vulpus saying, hey, we found the cave where the soldiers are, so at least he would know what was going on. So what their plan was, they were going to have Louis take the letter, get on one of their horses, ride it past the trolls to distract them, and drive straight back to town with the letter. At this point, I just had Louis just take a long drag off his cigarette, flick it out, and say, you got it, Sarge. He grabs the letter and rides past the trolls. Now, there are 2 trolls outside of this cave, and the idea was to distract both of them. So the way I decided to play it off was, I would have them roll perception, and if they failed, they would be distracted by the horse, because what they're not supposed to see is the group of people in the forest. Well, wouldn't you know, trolls get advantage on perception checks that rely on scent? And as the DM, I could easily just have said, well, I mean, they can smell the horse, and they can smell you. And that's exactly what I did, so I gave them advantage. One of the trolls did fail their perception check, so they didn't know what was going on, and they were about to head for the horse. The other troll, however, succeeded. So I had this troll grab the other troll, yank him back over and smack him upside the head and point to the forest where all the other people were. So I told the players, as you look out into the clearing, it's the clearest clearing you have ever seen. It is clear to you how clear this clearing is, and it trailed off a bit from there. Anyway, I had the trolls both roar at the party. And at this point, I actually had them roll perception. They all rolled perception, and I think it was Jeff who had noticed, in the back of one of the trolls' mouths, he could actually see sparkling, like there was some gold object stuck back there. Now, Hork took this opportunity to say, I'm gonna roar back. I'm like, okay, go ahead and roll intimidation. And he actually rolled pretty damn high. Now, I wasn't gonna have the trolls run away or anything, but I did meet him in the middle and say, tell you what, they're gonna go last in initiative. Although, before initiative actually started, Jeff took this opportunity to cast Crown of Madness on one of the trolls. He succeeded, and that troll who got hit upside the head clawed the other one in the face. The other troll just kind of took his turn to defend himself, and because it's a concentration spell, the troll would have had to make a saving throw every round to avoid the Crown of Madness, and he succeeded on the second round. So after this round, when he realized what he'd done, I just had him go to the other troll, just go, and now it was initiative. So something I should point out about this fight, I don't remember who was doing it. I'm gonna say Littlefoot, because of course it was him, because it's always him with this shit. I think he kept calling the trolls orcs, and he did it so many times, I kept calling the trolls orcs, and now to this day I keep calling random monsters orcs. And Hork the whole time is losing his shit like, you guys are all racist. Telling you, sensitivity training. The combat overall went pretty well. They really didn't have too many problems taking out the trolls, but something interesting that had happened. In the first round of combat, Jeff had cast Firebolt on one of the trolls, and I began describing that the troll regenerated. Now at the end of the troll's turn, a troll will regenerate 1d10 points of health, unless it takes acid or fire damage. And I actually began describing how it regenerated, but he pointed out it even regenerates when it takes fire damage. And Mr. Brand New Player is 100% right, because yeah, it does not regenerate, it took fire damage. Something I should also point out, I had this encounter set up 2 sessions ago, and I was not at all expecting to have a sorcerer. Funny how things work, ain't it? So they took out one of the trolls with no problem. The other one I decided to have the loathsome limb variation, in which if they take a certain amount of slashing damage, their limbs can fall off and start attacking them separately. The way it played out, one of their arms started attacking individually separate from its body, but it really wasn't a big deal. Now because the players had all leveled up and they had Huey and Dewey with them, Louis did not come back, by the way, he just rolled all the way back into town. Once again, this fight was no big deal at all. Once Hork got the killing blow in on the final troll, I said he just cut it straight through its mouth and opened like a Pez dispenser. At this point, they got to see what was inside the troll's mouth. They were actually really smart about it too, because they decided to burn both of the bodies. They didn't really have to, but that's good thinking. And I actually showed them a picture of the device on my laptop. What is this? Well, let's find out together. So I had the players all roll insight to see if they could even figure out what the item was. Littlefoot rolled high enough to determine it is a wand, and then Jeff rolled Arcana to see if he could determine what type of wand it was. Well, he rolls a natural 20, to which I tell him, well, you, sir, know exactly what this is. That is the Wand of Wonder. You had heard tales about it long ago. To which he asked, before I got struck by lightning? Before then. Long ago, you had heard tales of this incredible wand, created by the wizard Carnelian the Mad. Remember that name? It will be on the test. It is a wand that is said to have incredible power with random results. To which he then says, oh, it's like the Wabbajack? It is exactly like the Wabbajack. So I should also mention, by the way, Jeff is neutral evil. He flat out said when creating a character, I want to make a character who cares only about himself and will screw over everyone else given the opportunity. I said, yeah, probably neutral evil. So once he rolls and finds out what this is, he says, so only I know this? Yep, only you know that. He turns to Littlefoot, who has the wand, and says, hey, so I don't know what that does, but you should totally give it to me. And Littlefoot's like, okay. So now he has their magical short sword and the Wand of Wonder. Now, it was only after this fight did Hork realize something. So trolls are classified as giants. And Hork completely forgot to use his Mace of Giant Slaying. He was kicking himself so hard after that fight. In fact, that's pretty much why I set this fight up to begin with, so he would have a chance to use it. Yep, Them's the breaks, kid. So after this fight, they enter the cave to try and see if they can find these soldiers. Now, every single character, I'm pretty sure, minus Huey and Dewey, have dark vision, so they can see no problem. As they look inside the cave, they do see what appears to be two soldiers sitting down near the edge. They seem really beat up, like even their armor is dented. They walk over to the soldiers and they actually start thinking they're dead because the soldiers at first aren't saying anything and they're not moving. Once they get close, however, one of them pipes up and says, very hurt, "We're not dead. We got jumped by the trolls." So they start questioning him, like, who are you? How did you get here? What happened? To which the soldier simply says, "We work for the Red Sun," which is the mercenary company. "We got jumped by the trolls and they dragged us in here." Now, they're not buying that story at all, and quite frankly, nor should they. So Hork, Littlefoot, and Ducky all roll perception to see if they can find any hints as to what's up here. Hork rolls a 1, Littlefoot rolls a 2, Ducky rolls a natural 20. So I say, well, Hork, you think they're dead, Littlefoot, you think they're mannequins. Now, Ducky, you who is paying any amount of attention around here, actually noticed that on their armor, where their insignias would be, those insignias are missing. Now, Ducky, even though he knows the insignias are missing, actually casts Zone of Truth on them. I didn't even know he had that ability. So he casts Zone of Truth. Now, only one of the soldiers are talking anyway, but he did fail his saving throw. And I actually did look up how the spell works, so I was within my purview to do this, but what I was doing was I had this soldier give answers that were technically true, but not answering the question. For example, who are you? What do you mean, we're soldiers? But the crux of it was Littlefoot asks, where are you from? And that soldier just responds, you don't recognize my accent, we're from the same village. And it took him a few seconds, but I think they all managed to piece together what that meant, because remember, Littlefoot's from Stonevale. So at this point, Ducky says, yep, those are the Stonevale troops. And then I had Hork and Huey give me a dexterity saving throw. I didn't tell them why just yet. I set the number as 16, and wouldn't you know, they both rolled exactly 16. So what had happened was, these two soldiers were going to jump up really quickly, grab Hork and Huey, put their swords to their throat, and hold them in place, and then negotiations would begin. It was a cool idea, but I was pretty sure I wasn't going to get away with it, which was fine because everything played out pretty well anyway. So Hork and Huey just grabbed these guys and flipped them over them, because they're both soldiers and they're not dumb enough to fall for that, believe me. They kick the sword away from one of the soldiers. This is important. So now these two soldiers are on the ground, and Hork says, I'm going to kill one of them. Now, both of the paladins are like, no, you are not. They are at our mercy. You're not killing them. Hork is not happy about this, because those are his enemy. And remember, his hatred for his enemies is unrational and unrelenting. But eventually, after talking with Ducky a bit, who remember, Ducky is his handler, Hork says, fine, look, I'm just going to walk over there and punch them in the face. Now, remember, they had only disarmed one of them. So he walks over to one to punch him in the face, and I start thinking, yeah, that's an opportunity attack right there. So I rolled for a sneak attack, and I roll a natural 20. So as a reminder, we were doing critical hits the way it's done in 4th edition, which is to say, if you roll a critical hit, it's an automatic hit with maximum damage. Well, these soldiers have short swords with poison. And that poison was 4d6 damage. I had actually played it out this way because I wasn't sure if they were going to fight the soldiers straight up, but if they did, I wanted it to be that while the soldiers were going to go down pretty easily, it was going to be nasty if they got hit. Now, the way I played it off, however, was Hork took the maximum damage and the maximum poison damage. Technically, however, I was incorrect about that. The way 4th edition works is you would take maximum damage, but I still would have had to roll for the poison, and he would have had a saving throw to take half of that damage. But really, it was a lot more dramatic this way, and it made things much more interesting. So I said, Hork, you walk over to this soldier, and he just slides his short sword straight up your neck, like straight into your mouth under your chin. And you take 29 points of damage, including the poison. Littlefoot used lay on hands on Hork pretty quickly, and after one extra round of combat where they did a little more damage, I had the soldiers put their hands behind their backs, interlock their fingers, and get on their knees and cross them. All smiling the whole time. They are now prisoners of war, and they know as per rules of engagement, they're not to be killed. And while Hork is still really not happy about this, he decides, fine, let's take them back to the inn. We can interrogate them there. So, they get back to their wagon with one horse left on it and begin riding back into town. At this point, I said, everyone who is sitting inside of the wagon, give me a perception check. And they all do. They roll perfectly fine. I say, you see the one soldier who's been talking this whole time, look around, and start eyeing you up, and then he begins laughing. Oh, that's funny. To which Littlefoot's like, what, do we laugh too, or what's up? And I had this soldier just look to them and ask, how's Frank? And that's where we ended the session. And it actually took the players a few minutes to realize what I had meant by that. And it was actually hilarious watching them work it out, because Littlefoot had said, what do you mean, how would this guy know Frank? Nobody knows Frank. What'd you do to Frank? Me? I didn't do anything. Frank's perfectly fine, probably. I kid you not, between sessions, I had multiple players flat out threaten me that if I did anything to Frank, they were gonna burn down both kingdoms. Which was even more hilarious because I think it actually took 2 weeks between sessions, so I had more time to keep messing with them. I think I even told Hork at one point, look, right now it's Schrodinger's Frank. He is both alive and dead until you find out otherwise. I even started saying things like, I have no idea why you think Frank would be in any danger. Why would he be in any danger? He's probably perfectly fine all alone by himself in that inn. And by the way, that's exactly why Vulpes left the inn at the beginning of the session. And even after the session, while I was walking out to my car, Littlefoot pointed out very astutely, you know, I don't feel like Frank was in any danger until we fell in love with him. But yeah, that was that session. Overall, things went very smoothly. I think it was around this point where I really started hitting my stride as the DM, and I think it was also the point where the players all started kind of working as a cohesive unit. Even Jeff, for his very first session, he played perfectly fine. I think once he realized how everything kind of worked and how you should be interacting with the players, he picked it up perfectly. So as I had mentioned before, I had no clue how magic worked in this game, and it turns out the rules of magic combat and the rules of combat are two very different things. Now I'm a lot better about it now, but it did take a lot of looking through the player's handbook, figuring out how spells are actually supposed to work, and how spell save DC works, and how attack spells versus incantations work, and how cantrips work, and how this goes on for some time. Something I should also mention is that this encounter was actually supposed to be in the previous session. Like I had mentioned, I did not expect them to fight those mercenaries in the tavern. In fact, those mercenaries were half Red Dragon veterans because those soldiers were supposed to be half Red Dragon veterans. The reason they had to fight 3 of them instead of 2 was because I had said there were 3 mercenaries at the beginning of the encounter, and I couldn't go back on what I said. And this was a bit of a shorter session. Unfortunately, some of the players weren't able to play very long, so we just wrapped it up as quickly as we could. But I actually had a plan for a separate encounter. If they had gone across the exact same field again, where they had fought land sharks, I was gonna have the ground shake again. And depending on how much damage they had taken from the previous fights, I was either gonna have them fight it, or have the ground continue to shake but nothing happened just to freak them out. I've done stuff like that before. But overall, it was a very good session, and we introduced a brand new player. And hey, not only is the guy a blast to play with, but boy does he do damage in combat. So until next time, we will meet again in episode 5, titled, Not Personal, Strictly Business. Be seeing you.